Hello.
Good morning.
Goedemorgen.
Wow, Natalie and Govinda are already here.
Yeah, boy, they're bright and early. They beat us to it. Hi, Govinda.
Yeah.
Hi, Nellie.
Hello.
Hello, Hashim. Guten Abend.
Hello. This is Raj.
There's Raj with a hello.
Hello again.
Yeah, so here we are. It's Yoga Sutras time. We've been kind of slow going through this part here on the Yamas and the Niyamas. We were trying to do it in one shot, and it's turned into three because
it's so juicy.
It's so juicy. We touched on these sutras that we're going to do today last week, but then decided to, stretch it out. Well, the idea wasn't to stretch it out, but to try to really drive this point home here. About the principles of what to do when we're not doing this stuff. And whoops, wait a minute, boy, there's Scott. Hi, Scott.
And Roseanne.
And
down the list.
Johnny says just now. Okay, just now. And hi, everyone. We don't know what just now is about, but it must be important.
And Roseanne.
And Roseanne's, oops. Hi, Roseanne.
Underneath it? No.
Huh?
B, yeah, B.
Where's B?
Lower.
Lower?
There. Up above Rach's.
There's
hello.
B.
Yeah.
Hi. Oops, almost missed B.
Making so fast.
And there's Eileen. Boy, popping in, popping. Anyway, so that's where we are. I will wait a minute here. This is where we are. I almost forgot to show that there. So we're still on Yamas and Niyamas in chapter 2. What's that noise? That's a rojo. Okie dokie. I'll take that out. Okay, and put the sutra in. How's that?
Sounds like a plan.
There we go. There's the sutra.
What's rat?
I don't know. It's one of those catchy words. It's like
hi, Rosalind.
Cool or something like that. Hi, Roz. Good morning, namaste. Boy, there's a fancy proper namaste. Namaste.
Namaste. Namaste.
Namaste.
That one I know. Those are kisses and hugs.
Yeah, well, they're making those things turn red. Now, in the Facebook thing, there's a feature now. If you type in rad, you get red. I'll show you later.
Okay.
Somebody did that in the table talk group. I didn't know what it was. I've forgotten who it was, typed it. And I said, how did you make that red? R-E-D, red. And then somebody commented, I think it was Roz who commented, and then I went and searched it, and I found out it has a name. I forgot what they call it. But it's only a few words that does that. If you write congratulations in any of a whole bunch of languages, it makes it red. But then if you roll over it if you click on it or roll over it with your mouse, it causes fireworks or balloons or something.
No, I didn't know that. Never done it. Hi, Inika. Kind of thought you would be at home with.
Hi, Inika.
Busy home with people.
Busy home with people?
Yeah, because they're celebrating.
They're celebrating. Yeah. Oh, yeah, there's a birthday in the house, you said. Yeah. We say, happy birthday to you. That's all of our singing. That's it. All righty. So are we ready here?
Yeah. What do you have left of this?
Okay, remember, that we have talked about yamas and niyamas. I guess everybody can see the screen in this way. See, I made us little bitty. We're down there in the corner.
I take a little distance because of my eating.
And you're not in front of even the camera.
Because I'm still having a bite.
We're still biting.
One more.
And so there you go.
Happy belly button day.
Anyway, so it's talking about the yamas and the niyamas. And there's a subtlety here. This is what I wanted to just make absolutely sure. This is one of those things that is one of the most difficult concepts to really understand and to live and practice, but yet at its core is utterly simple. And once you see it, it's totally obvious. But it seems to take a lot to be able to get there. That's why I wanted to pause and take the time to go through this. Again, when the yama, I'm going to say the short version of this, when the yamas and the niyamas are, this is a tough word, but it works, inhibited. Another alternative to that is this word here. You could say disturbed by. When my practice of the yamas and the niyamas is disturbed by, or inhibited by, or blocked by, obstructed by troublesome thoughts, comma, there's the important comma right there, comma, what do I do? Principles in the opposite direction or contrary thought should be cultivated. It can be as simple as, mind, this is not useful, this is going to bring me nothing but suffering, lead me to greater ignorance, don't go there. And this is the principle. The actions arriving from such negative thoughts are formed directly. There's three principles here. When we do something ourselves, or when we get somebody else to do it, or we simply approve of it. The point of this, in common language, we can end up saying in a relationship with any person, it can be a political difference, it can be a marriage difference, it can be between two friends, two co-workers, between an employer and employee, just any two people. One can say, well, I didn't do anything, but he had that coming to him. That person was a bad person, and finally something happened to him, and it's good. He deserved that consequence. I hope I'm saying that clearly. Patanjali here on these three things is making the point that in relation to our own samskaras, our own deep habit patterns, our own deep negative or positive thinking, it doesn't matter whether we did the action, whether we recruited somebody else into doing that thing for us, or I merely approved of it. The effect on my samskaras is essentially the same. So that bad guy, finally fate caught up with him, and we say, well, it was his karma. He deserved to have that bad consequence coming to him because he was a bad person. And so what effect does that have on my samskaras, my deep impressions? It reinforces my dvesha toward that person, my aversion towards that person.
The desire for justice?
The desire for justice, yes.
That is...
The desire. Thank you. That's a very good phrase. one of the things that I'm not, when I tell you this story, I'm not saying that I think that rules should be changed one way or the other. I attempt to stay neutral on that opinion. But one of the things I have heard of, I don't know other countries, I think the U.S., many countries in the world no longer have what they call, clean words, capital punishment. You know, what do you do with a murderer? You execute him. You kill him. That person has killed another person, and part of the rationale for that is the Bible's idea that says an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth. You take out an eye, so therefore you're going to lose your eye. And so you killed somebody, you did something bad, so we are going to kill you. That's not where I was going. I wasn't trying to bring up that sort of political debate to take sides on it. But when a person in the U.S., typically, as I understand it, when a person in the U.S. is going to be executed, when the government is going to kill a prisoner, the family of the victim is permitted to watch the killing. If they're going to hang them or shoot them or give them the electric chair or put them in a gas chamber, it doesn't matter which one it is, they have it in a special little room that is the killing room. And they allow the family members to come and watch the execution. Now ponder on this carefully, and I'm attempting to say this in a way that is not about, I'm not trying to make a political point of whether there should or should not be executions like that. That's a whole other question that we all can have our own perspective on. And I kind of have my own perspective, but that perspective is not relevant to this conversation here in these sutras. I think we could probably argue that it is very relevant, but I don't know. I'm trying to not pursue that point. But so imagine there is a person convicted of murder of your family member, and you are allowed to sit there and watch that person be executed. The rationale for having that is that it allows the family to have a sense of closure, of being able to let go. But ponder this. You're sitting there watching another human being be killed in front of you. And you can sit there and say, well, it's the jury who found the person guilty. It's the government who's doing the execution. It's the judge who gave the sentence to the man that says you are going to be executed by whatever means it is. I did not do that. I'm just sitting here watching the killing. And this is supposed to help me feel free from my remorse over the loss of my loved one. But just notice what probably happens to the unconscious mind of the person who is observing this killing. It may make the hatred even more intense. Does watching one human being be killed, obviously, does it bring back the other person?
No, it doesn't remove the klesha.
Does it remove or attenuate or weaken the klesha, or does it make it stronger? And I'm just making the point that it seems that it might make it stronger in exactly the wrong direction. And so I'm mentioning this example because it's an extreme example, and sometimes extreme examples make the point. The point here being that in terms of our own samskaras, our own klesha, our own aversion towards that person, it doesn't matter whether I'm the one who killed that criminal or I recruited somebody else to do it. I recruited the government to do it and the jury to do it and the executioner to do it. Or I take a stance, I said, I had nothing to do with it. I did nothing.
But yet you approve.
But I approve of it. And the effect of that is that my samskara, my klesha, my coloring of hatred towards that person, and on like that, increases. And this is the point This is the point that Patanjali is making here. Now, it is so brutal, says Nellie. Yeah. And Raj says it's the opposite effect. What we're trying to do is have remorse and get over it and go on. And instead what it does is it feeds it and makes it worse. Yes, good way of putting it, Raj. And it is brutal. And so we take a brutal act and we repay it with another brutal act. And again, I'm just using this as an example that is kind of extreme. Not kind of, but it is an extreme example. So notice what can happen in a work relationship, in a place of employment, in a business or an office setting or any worker setting where there's a conflict between two people, between you and another person. That other person thinks that he or she is right, and you know that you are right. And so look how easy it is to gossip with other people and try to recruit people, in effect, trying to recruit other people. You know, if Rojo is being a pain in the neck around here and I can't get her to do what I want, and I say, Ma, help me out here. You know, Rojo's being a troublemaker, and would you please get her straightened out? You see, I'm not doing anything. I'm recruiting Ma Tree to do my dirty work for me.
Or even if you just want me to sign up with you, and I would agree with you.
Yeah, I just want to sit there and tell her, you know how bad that Rojo is. And she starts nodding and agreeing. She's trying to be nice to me. And so, see, you're not in the picture hardly.
Yeah.
And so she said, oh, yes, Swamiji, you are right. Yeah, you are right. She is wrong.
She really is a pain in the ass.
She really is a pain in the ass. You know that, Rojo. Mm-hmm. And so you see, I'm recruiting her to take my side. And again, Patanjali is pointing out to us here that it doesn't matter whether I go to Rojo and I say, Rojo, blah, 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 blah. Or I recruit Ma Tree to go tell her off or something like that, even if I only succeed in getting her on my side, because
or you didn't say anything, but in the meantime I do
something, or I do nothing,
and yours just,
and all of a sudden one day the two of them have a fight, and Ma Tree is beating up on Rojo, and I'm sitting there quietly going, wow, yeah, you know, Rojo, she really had it coming to her.
This is such a high stance of being.
It's a high stance of being, yes.
Because, I mean, it slips in everything. And indeed, it's the realization that having the klesha in the first place is the troublemaker. Because that is what keeps me, in quotation marks, bounded. It keeps me not free. It keeps me asleep. It keeps me into this delusion.
Yes.
Because
so if we talk about yoga as chitta vritti nirodha, yoga is the nirodha, blah, 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 and then I'm going to be self-realized. We can sit there for years and decades and say, I've been meditating for 30, 40 years. Why have I not experienced samadhi? I run into this. This happens. And very often, it's this kind of thing we're looking at here that got overlooked for 30, 40 years. And there's just no escaping that if we don't look at this aspect of our makeup, we cannot get to the higher rungs.
Can I put then? I want to stay neutral in my comments, but it's hard. The government.
As long as you side with me.
No, the government. I can clearly see that. But I already hear the word I. I can clearly see that. And again, now opinion comes that there is injustice to equality down here. Now, seeing this could be only done with buddhi. In a sense, could it be really that you can see that it's done and thus be free from klesha? Or is it always intermingled, and at one point, it's not that you don't care, but you just allow the world to be the world?
Something like that.
So even seeing it for what it is already an opinion.
You are sitting here in the United States watching some of, now there's an opinion in this.
Yeah.
watching some of the craziness that's going on in the politics of the United States and the government decisions that are being made.
Mm-hmm.
So you have a certain perspective on that. What if you went back in a couple months to Holland and you discovered that all of a sudden all of the Dutch politicians were doing the same stuff that you're seeing happening here in the U.S.?
Yeah.
It might be a more intense experience, right?
Probably.
Probably. Why? Because now it's my country.
Mm-hmm. Although that distinction is fading for both, but I understand what you're saying.
Yeah, but you just said it's fading for both. I
can see that.
But that's the point.
I can see that this is blue. I mean, we've called it.
Don't get too abstract, or we will lose the point.
Yeah, but so how is it in relation to having opinions? They are automatically. You
can have an opinion without hatred.
Yes, that's what I want to hear you say. So
you can have an opinion without hatred.
Yes, and without the klesha, you can see something and then also not be attached to whatever is done with it.
Yeah.
I just want to have. That's what I want.
Well, this is what it's about. It's about the klesha.
Mm-hmm.
It keeps going back to the klesha, which we talk about a lot, and it's easy. It's easy to accidentally. It's easy to accidentally turn the discussion of klesha into a conversation of philosophy. And it's just concepts that we're talking about. It's like going to a college class where they talk about, it's a class, World Philosophy 101, and you discuss and you read books on some of the philosophical perspectives of the leading philosophers of the world. What did Socrates and Plato and Nietzsche and what are some other names of philosophers? We can study what their perspective was and never personalize it, never put it into our own lives. This klesha stuff that we keep talking about is not mere philosophy. This is one of the things that happens, unfortunately, that's off track with the Yoga Sutras. I have met quite a few people over decades of time who tell me they have spent years, listen to this phrase of words, studying the Yoga Sutras. And some of you have heard me say before, the Yoga Sutras is like a cookbook. It's not a book that's studied in the classroom or in the library. You take a cookbook is used in the kitchen. The Yoga Sutras is supposed to be used in the kitchen of life.
And Inika had a comment
Inika said
already before Raz, because Raz
is the person who is killed aware that you are there, so you can be there for the person then. Can you be there then out of that point of view? I guess you mean the person who was the victim of the murder.
Yeah. I think Aranka posted this. There was a guy who killed a daughter, and the mom actually showed him for the first time in his life what real love was, because he had never got it from anyone, and he always associated love with violence, because that's how he was acquainted by it his whole life, by his parents and by his surroundings. And he was saying that the mother of the daughter that he killed actually was the first person that showed him love, and he was just so touched, and it was an amazing story because she took him for what it was. So I don't know if that helps, but
I'm gonna make an attempt to address what I think Inika is saying there by saying, is the person who is killed aware that you are there? And I need to respond to this by saying, I acknowledge, Inika, that any example we give, I use that as an extreme example. And we can philosophically, I'm not saying you're doing this, but we can philosophically debate any example. And we can do point, counterpoint. And we could say, as you did, well, but the family being there is for the benefit of the deceased person who is sitting there watching justice happen. Okay, it's a different comment. Make up your own example. But the point is not what we're doing for that deceased person. It was an attempt. Maybe it was a very poor attempt. I will acknowledge maybe it was a very poor attempt on my part to use that extreme example. But sometimes I find with things that it is only extreme examples that can be heard at all. I have been watching people for decades overlook the subtlety of this point being made here. And at a minimum, I find that very, 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 very unfortunate. And the times that I notice it most unfortunate is when I get an email or a text message or a phone call or a personal visit with somebody wanting to tell me about some drama, some problem going on in their life. And there is nothing coming out of their mouth at all, nothing coming out of their mouth at all about how my samskars have got me hooked up in this and I'm having trouble attenuating it. It always goes back into the drama of the moment. Let's go to the surface most level of behavioral psychology that basically comes down to, how do I change my husband? How do I train my wife? I have a bad husband. I have a bad wife. I need to get rid of this one and trade it in on a new one, with almost no awareness of ourself. And it is ourself. It is my samskaras. It is my stuff. Many years ago, over 10 years ago, we were having a satsang here locally, local people. And actually one of the women in the satsang was bemoaning how bad her husband was, that she was in the process of divorcing. And everybody in the satsang gradually, over a period of about 30 minutes, agreed with her that some things are so bad that there is justifiable self-righteous hatred. That's where they ended up. And somebody, it happened to be Philip, if you know Philip was sitting there in the room, and he looked over at me and he said, "Swamiji, you have not said anything in 30 minutes. You have said nothing in 30 minutes. And I'm curious what you have to say about what we're talking about." Now, meanwhile, remember, everybody in the group has sort of collectively agreed that this woman was right in her justifiable self-righteous anger at her bad husband. Everybody was agreed that sometimes an abuser is so bad that it's justifiable that I have hate for him. That's what was playing out in the room. And so Philip wanted to know what I had to think about it. And I turned to the woman who was telling us the story, and I asked her, "Do you have any belief system or perspective that there is a connection between body and mind? Your thoughts and emotions, is there a connection between that and your body?" And she gave a sort of vague, "Well, yes." And I said, "When you feel something going on in your mind, does it cause does it cause a change in your brain chemistry?" "Well, yes, of course." "Does it cause something to happen to your blood?" I said, "For example, the adrenal cortex is a little part of what sits on top of the kidneys, and it is the part of our physical anatomy that releases adrenaline. It's there for emergency. So adrenaline comes out into the bloodstream and we're ready. It's called fight or flight response. We're ready to run away from the tiger who is chasing it. It serves a very practical purpose." And so I said, "Do you see it this way?" She said, "Yes." And I said, "So when you are having all this stuff going on with your husband, this happens to your brain chemistry and your bloodstream, right?" She said, "Well, yes." And I said, "So there's adrenaline in the bloodstream." I said, "My question to you is simply this: whose blood is it?" And she had to answer, "It's my blood." So it's your adrenaline inside of your blood causing your reaction. And yet I'm going to blame my husband for my blood? And I mean, it's another story. And it's just, all we can do is talk stories. If we talk concepts, this Patanjali is introducing concepts. But when we just look at concepts, this is where we can accidentally fall into the trap of just being intellectual philosophers and never getting around to applying it in our lives. And this is what is important here. Patanjali is pointing out the first part of what we're looking at this moment. The first part says, it doesn't matter whether I do this action, I go kill that bad guy, that person, I know that person, killed my loved one. And so I'm going to go get my gun. And this happens. We see this happen. And I'm going to go over and I'm going to violently kill that other person because it's the right thing to do. Or I say, no, I'm not going to do that. I'm going to go hire a contract killer. I'm going to go give somebody a couple $1,000s and they will go kill him. Or this is the principle we're talking about. The point is that something happens to my samskaras, my karmashaya, my field of consciousness. And then I can wonder decades later, why am I not experiencing samadhi? I had an insight. I'll tell you, maybe this personal story will help you. Many years ago, what?
No, maybe in the meantime they have responded because it doesn't go up because.
Yeah, I know, but I can only, how many stories can I tell at one time? And it doesn't matter. We'll get the point made here somehow.
Yeah.
In my late 20s, I worked for a corporation. Doesn't matter, the details don't matter. But there was a woman I had hired into a supervisory job, which is also, the details are irrelevant, but she was having husband troubles. And she was trying to get away from him. He was being violent and abusive. So she was actually went and started living in a women's shelter where women were hiding away from their violent husbands. And so life was pretty hard for this woman, bless her heart. And now I was not there when the story happened that I'm about to tell you. I was transferred by my company. I got a promotion and I was in a different location, 1,000 miles away when the event happened. One day the phone rang. I answered my office phone, and somebody at the location I had been there before told me this story, that her husband had walked into the office, walked to the receptionist and asked if he could see her. They called back or went back and got her. And later, a few months later, I had a conversation with the woman who was sitting at the desk beside her. And she told me, she said, I think she knew what was about to happen. She got up from her desk, walked out to the reception area. The man pulled out a .38 revolver gun and emptied it in her chest. And the witnesses to it said they think that she was probably dead before she hit the ground. He just bang, 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 bang. The bullets went into her chest and she was dead. That's not the story I wanted to tell you. The story I wanted to tell you is about my reaction. I instantly wanted that man dead. Now, at the time that this story happened, I did not know these yogic principles myself. But years later, when I was running into this stuff that we're looking at here, this was a story that flashed from my past as, for me, a very personal example of this principle here. I wanted that man dead. Period. And to this day, I don't know whatever happened to him. I did not follow through. I decided to not follow through on my curiosity to find out if he got what was due to him. I have no idea if he got away with the murder. I have no idea whether he's spent the rest of his life in prison. I don't know if he was executed. I have no idea. But I made a conscious decision because some part of me knew that to keep following through on what happens with this is not important. And it's just going to suck me in deeper and deeper. I had stumbled into this yogi principle. So when I ran into these sutras that we're looking at right now, and I was trying to understand this and understand the philosophy, if you will, said sarcastically, of studying the Yoga Sutras, there was more to it than that. I was around a guy, Swami Rama, who was trying to get us to see the practicality of this stuff and you can see him. You can read it in his books. We go through it sometimes. And in his videos, he'll make sarcastic comments about the intellectuals. This is not an intellectual study. And I know, I understand your question, Innika, that you're raising, but we can talk about the other people and on and on and on, and we end up accidentally having a conceptual conversation. Or if it gets really out of control, we end up with a philosopher's debate. And this is very practical, very down to earth. I wanted that man dead. And if I had been in front of him, a friend of mine who was also with me on the management staff of this place where we were, he told me some months later that he heard the gunshots and went to where it was, and the man was running out of the building, and he took off running after him. And the man went out through some glass doors, big building, commercial building glass doors. And the man went through I don't mean he broke the glass. He opened the door and ran out towards the parking lot to run away. And this fella that I'm talking about, my friend coworker, he was running behind him. He was going to try to catch him. And he got to the glass door, and the man had stopped outside, spun around, took the gun and aimed it at him. And it was like a Clint Eastwood movie. There was an old Clint Eastwood movie you may have seen where the bad guy puts a gun at him and he says, "I don't remember. Do you remember if you have another bullet left to shoot me?" And it was like that. And so, but anyway, the bad guy who had just murdered his wife, everybody knew it. There were many witnesses. He was running out of the building. This guy ran behind him trying to catch him. And he told me, he said, when I started to approach the door, and this gun is pointed at me, he said, I didn't know if there was a bullet coming or not. He said, I didn't know if he had shot all of his bullets. And so all of a sudden, he said, I dove away from the glass door, dove over there, and the man got away. And he never did know whether the man had another bullet to shoot him. So it sounds like a Hollywood movie drama, but it was reality. And so this is what happened. And I'm acknowledging to you, it's just another story, everybody. And Innika, this is all we can do is ponder in our own lives stories that we've run into that capture this for us. There are many, many of our personal stories that don't have anything to do with guns and murder and extremes like that.
No, but we're loaded with
But we're loaded with kleshes, yes. And we all have many, many examples that we can internally come up with and say, wow, it is so tempting for me to carry hatred for that person. For me, I don't mean to be political. I try to avoid it, but it took me a long time to get over George Bush. And now we got Donald Trump. It's like, wow, it went from bad to worse. And so these are things that get held in our own karma-shaya, our own field of samskaras, our own latent unconscious. This is where it stores, right behind Ma's head. See, that's where the problem is.
It's me.
It's right in the back of her head. Right in the back of her head. There's the trouble. So this stuff we keep talking about is not mere philosophy. It's not. And so there's an example for me, and it was one of the big examples that flashed into my mind that says, wow, this is my personal example of these principles here that Patanjali is talking about in this block of Yoga Sutras. Introduces the Yamas and the Niyamas, all 10 of them, and then acknowledges that sometimes we don't live up to them.
All the time.
Which happens all the time. So sometimes we don't live up to them. Question, Mr. Patanjali, if you were a disciple of Patanjali and you were sitting by the Ganges or up in the high Himalayas by a stream or in a mountain cave together, and you would say, Patanjali, Mr. Patanjali, would you explain this to me a little bit more? You'd sit around and you'd have conversations about this. And he'd say, what you need to do, my child, my dumb student, you foolish person, you need to be aware, you need to be open to your own unconscious processing so that you can see that often you don't live up to these 10 principles that are in the Yamas and the Niyamas. And you need to be aware of that so that you can realize I'm going in the wrong direction. And then what does Patanjali say here? Give me one moment here. What does Patanjali say here? To remind oneself these thoughts are causing unending misery and ignorance is the contrary thought. You see, the previous sutra says cultivate the contrary thought. So when the guy who murdered the woman, the wife, who is a woman I knew, I'm trying to practice ahimsa, non-harming. What's the contrary thought? I have a reaction. Here's me. Here's Swamiji. I wasn't Swamiji at the time, but here's my reaction is I wanted to kill that man. I either wanted to kill him or have him executed. It didn't matter to me what, but I wanted the man dead. I just wanted him dead. Now, who's the person who suffers from that? Me. So here's Patanjali says, what do I need to do? I need to be aware that, wow, oh mind, oh silly mind, if you keep carrying around this hatred towards this man who you've never actually met, the person who's going to suffer is me. I'm going to continue to carry the emotional burden of this hatred for the person. Now, when I even sit here now, it's still touching to me, but the memory is of the thought of the woman that this was it was not just, but and it was out of caring for her. But I feel no sense of hatred towards this man who I never actually met. Now at this point, 40 years later, it's just a story, and it's about 40 years ago that this happened. And I think the reason that I continue to remember it is because it's such a personal example of this principle in these two sutras that we're looking at right now. So as the awareness that this is going to lead me into misery and ignorance, that's what I need to remember. And the principle in the opposite direction was recommended in the previous state. This is the opposite direction. So it's tempting to say, well, I should cultivate love for that man. Well, that's not the suggestion. How do I convince myself to love that man? Now, if I were aware of these principles, gradually I will see that at the core of even the murderer is Atman. I will eventually see that, and that helps. But that's not the starting point. The starting point is to realize, wow, I'm feeling this intense hatred, extreme dvesha, extreme coloring of aversion towards this person. I'm feeling that it's in my field of samskaras, and Patanjali says cultivate the opposite. What's the opposite of that? Love? No, that's not the opposite of that hatred is love. In another manner of speaking, it could be argued that, but that's not the point. The point being made here is I need to be aware that if I keep clinging to this dvesha, this aversion, I'm going to suffer, and this is not useful. That's the principle here. Well, now I'm going to come back up and see what I missed anyway. So very poignant for me right now. This is poignant stuff, isn't it? I think you're hearing, Scott. Despise the act, but not the actor. That's a way of putting it. But let us not create more despise. Didn't Arjuna see the whole of life? No, Arjuna did not. That was the problem. Arjuna did not see the whole of life. It was Krishna that saw the whole of life. Arjuna was completely deluded. And he had to listen to Krishna attempting to teach him. Now, the way the story is laid out, Arjuna was an example of a pretty good person, a pretty good sadhaka, a very good young student yogi. Did he see the whole of life? No, he did not. He was totally deluded. Go back and read chapter 1 again and identify with that. And I think that's a wonderful exercise to do. Go look at chapter 1 and plug Rosalind in. You can do this, I know, easily. We all can. See if you can find in yourself the delusion that Arjuna was feeling at the time. and recognize, okay, boss Krishna, I really am screwed up. I have some serious trouble here. Now what do I need to do? And then Krishna explains it to him. That's why all of this stuff ultimately is oral tradition, because we have to talk about this as best we can. And sometimes I give it my best shot, and sometimes I know that I'm missing the mark, and I'm just not able to come up with the perfect stories. But we keep trying. Inika, you got it. You're right. Taking a stance against such actions of ahimsa without personalizing it is the object. Yes, but let's recognize, I would say, Johnny, but also let's recognize that we have already personalized it when we're thinking about our own life. That's the issue, in a sense. We have already personalized it. We've already fallen into the trap. Yeah, whose blood, says Inika. That's right. Personalizing, Nellie mentions personalizing true. Yes, that's the trap. We can say don't personalize it, but we've already done it. I had to have a conversation with my friend about things going on in my life. Crazy time right now. And every time I put the focus on myself, my actions, my part of my situation, kept saying, don't be hard on yourself. Yeah, I understand that. Those who don't have any grasp at all of the concept of what we're doing, that will be very quick to tell you, as you just said, Terry, don't be hard on yourself. And the principle there is that there's a part of what your friend is saying that is very, very good and useful. Ahimsa means don't do harm. And so a core principle is, where do we start? Don't beat up on ourselves. So when you realize that you have not lived one of the yamas or niyamas, when you realize that, it's very easy to accidentally beat up on yourself. Oh, look, I'm a failure. I'm a bad sadhaka. I'm a bad student. I'm a bad meditator. I have failed one more time. And you see, we've just fallen into the trap again. Now we're doing harming to ourselves. And so there's some wisdom in what your friend was saying. People always want to look out to find the problems and solutions. Yes, it's rare to be able to have a conversation about a problem and personally dig into the patterns and beliefs that pulled me into the problem in the first place. That's right. If you have a friend that you can have a conversation with like that, that's a good friend. That's nice to have. And particularly if that friend understands the way in which yogically we're doing this stuff, which is not merely psychoanalyzing ourselves. We can accidentally fall into that trap. Let me just psychoanalyze myself on this point. There's a core simplicity, what Patanjali is telling us here, that the problem is that the root klesha, the root coloring is there. And the simple instruction in this sutra is to remind yourself, no, if I keep clinging to this, oh mind, if we keep clinging to this, I'm going to continue to suffer. And it's saying, let it go, let it go, let it go, mind, let it go. And not beating up on myself either. Are yogis pacifists? I don't know, Johnny. I guess it depends on what you call a pacifist. At the end of the Bhagavad Gita, was Arjuna a pacifist? We could argue it both ways. It depends on how we're defining a pacifist. There was a young man here who we sometimes see who was carrying a gun in the U.S. military. And he was sent off to Iraq when there was a war going on. This is not a political taking sides. And he stopped by to see me the evening before he was literally getting on the plane to go to Iraq. And I asked him, I said, may I ask you a question? He said, yes, sure. I said, do you think because of your spiritual values and because of your meditation practices, do you think that that if all of a sudden over there in Iraq, you rounded the corner of a building and you found yourself face to face with another guy and he had a gun and he was about to shoot you, he wanted to kill you? Now in his particular job, he wasn't supposed to be that person in combat. But I said, if it happened to happen, do you think there's any possibility that because of your personal values and your meditation practice, that you might hesitate. And he paused for a moment and he thought, and he said, yes. And I put a finger in his face. And I mean, it was loud. It wasn't quite screaming at him, but it was very forceful. I said, no, if that happens, you kill him. I said, don't you go over there and get yourself killed because of your values. I said, if that kind of event happens, it's a human being standing in front of you with a gun and you're standing there with a gun, somebody's going down. I said, don't go over there and get yourself killed. It's not about the president. It's not about Saddam Hussein. It's not about any of that. It's about you with a gun and that man with a gun, and he's about to kill you. I said, don't go get yourself killed. Don't do it with hatred. We don't have to do it with hatred. And so, was Arjuna a pacifist? I will say in one sense, yes, he was a pacifist because he had a total non-harming inside of him, because he had listened to everything Krishna was talking about and he had internalized it. This was the whole point of the Bhagavad Gita. Fight the battle of life that's in front of you. Do what's in front of you to do. Do what's in front of you to do. And if we hold the word pacifism in that way, yes. I sometimes think of a pretend example. 2 police officers get called in on the radio to go into a dangerous situation. One policeman is just a hothead sort of person, and he's always looking for a reason to beat somebody up or shoot somebody. And the other police officer is not. He walks in and he wants to dissipate the danger. He wants to bring peace into, maybe it's a domestic battle and something like that. So one cop is a hothead and the other one is very calm and peaceful. Which one is the better policeman? I say the one who's calm and is not looking for a fight. He's not looking to hurt somebody. So is he a pacifist? Well, yes, but if the need arises, will he do the action that's in front of him to do? Will he be a good police officer and do what's needed? Will he be a good soldier and do his duty, Arjuna? And so I say yes. So these are, Roseanne says, hard stories. These are hard stories, but I think they make good examples. Raj speaks of Pakistan and India. Have you ever been in Amritsar, Raj? In Amritsar, on the border between India and Iraq? I was there, visited Amritsar for all India Vedanta conference that was there, was my reason for being there. Anyway, at the literal border, as you know, most of the border between India and Pakistan, there's a no man's land of probably 100 meters, and there's walls on both sides, and there's I-beams sticking up, and it would be very hard to cross it. So it's heavily, heavily armed on both sides. So there's a road there by Amritsar that if they wanted to allow a truck to go across, that both sides have a gate that can go up or down, and so a vehicle can go through. And at sunset every day, on the Pakistan side, there's a flagpole with a Pakistan flag on it. On the India side, there's a flagpole with an Indian flag on it. And they have agreed on how to do this at the precise moment of official, whatever the time is, however they decide it. A soldier, a little team of, I think it was like 3 or 4 or 5 Pakistani soldiers walk out of a little house over there, and that 4 or 5 same soldiers, so same routine on the Indian side. They walk out there. They each walk up to their respective flagpole, and a man goes like this, and he pulls the flag down. Somebody else grabs the flag, and it's like precision. It's like a precision marching band. The two sides are working in exact unison, folding up their flag for the day, and somebody else puts it under his arm, and they're about to walk back into their building with the flag to take this flag down at sunset. And then one of the Pakistani soldiers and one of the Indian soldiers walks towards each other. And when they come to the middle, they shake hands and they nod. And it's a beautiful show. And I know it's a show. I do know it's a show. It's an act. But it's an attempt of two opposing governments, two sets of people who are not very nice to each other, attempting to live a peaceful example. And I found it, now I'm no fool. I'm not a foolish person to say, wow, there's peace between Pakistan and India. I'm not saying that, I'm not making that claim. But there is an attempt there to have some effort, to have, it maybe is some degree of human respect for the other person. And I found a beautiful thing to watch. And that happens to time, so it's a thing that people come to watch this. And at the time that I was there and saw that, it wasn't more than about a year or two, I think later, after that, I think is when it was, all of a sudden, each side, India and Pakistan, each one of them put approximately 1 million soldiers on that line. They were just about to go to war, and both of these countries are nuclear armed. It came very, 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 very close to a major, major war. And I remembered that place. They said, okay, well, the war was about to come. Yes, so anyway, I don't know. That's what comes to mind, Roz. I had extreme pleasure for Pakistan. Yes, of course. For what has is still happening between India and Pakistan. Message. Huh?
It's exactly the same. I think he posted it twice.
Yeah, I see. Okay. Yeah, it posted it twice. In a vision, he could not accept it. I don't know. I missed what that was talking about, Rosalind. Here in Brazil, Raj, I've been dealing with a strong devesh also for the president as it actually is now acknowledging it. Yeah, I've seen some of the news. We're kind of ill-informed about Brazil, Roseanne, but I've seen some of that news, and whenever I see what's going on there, I think of you, of course. And you know, you're a good yogi, and so you're living this, you're practicing this. That's all we can do. It's all we can do. Anyway, I hope this is useful, what we're talking about. It's extremely, it should be obvious, but ponder this, please, all of you, ponder these two sutras here. There's something extremely useful in these things. I can do it myself, I can get it done through others, or I can merely approve of it. But the key is to remember, it's my blood. It's my kleshas, it's my samskaras. And at the same time, none of that is mine. And cultivating the opposite of ahimsa is not love. Cultivating the opposite of harming is cease harming. Oh, I just fell into it again. Look how easy it is. Particularly with loved ones, particularly with family members and coworkers and close friends. Those are the people who we are most quick to respond to in a negative way. And so we have to observe it in ourselves, that this is my habit. Look what I just fell into it again. It doesn't mean we're bad people. We're not sinners. We're not evil. It's just the way minds operate. There is Abhinivesha, the fifth klesha, which is fear of death, self-preservation. It's natural. It's how we operate. But let us cultivate not only the animalistic side of ourselves, which will defend, but let us also cultivate the higher perspective. And we can do that. Okay?
Okay.
Smith, you know, Satya is truthfulness. Doesn't just mean, well, I'm being honest. I say, okay, Ma, I'm going to be honest. You're a jerk. Is that being honest? Satya, truthful?
No, because it's not leaning on ahimsa.
It's not leaning on ahimsa. I'm off track again. But if I'm hiding if I'm hiding away internally, mentally, emotional from the people I spend most of my time with, this is not living in truthfulness. Asteya is non-stealing. Well, I'm not stealing anything from her and she's not stealing anything from me. But what if we accidentally fall into the trap of taking advantage of the other person for this or that or the other thing? It is in effect stealing. And so this is why we must do our own introspection and see, wait a minute, I'm not perfect at this non-stealing thing. If I fall into the trap of losing the lightheartedness over Raj coming here and making doses for us, if Matri and I are sitting there talking about Raj coming in a few weeks and getting more doses, and we're talking about with levity and love, this is fun, it's playful, it's good, joyous living. But if we too much fall into that trap, then all of a sudden, for some reason, the mangoes is a good story because mangoes are out of season. So if she and I are sitting here expecting mangoes in a few weeks and we don't get them from Raj, then in effect, we might say, wow, we're stealing from Raj. We're taking advantage of Raj because we expect him to be a dosa and mango delivery service. Now, if we see it, then we can laugh over it. We can joke about it, and it's not a problem. But if we overlook it and we don't see that this is the habit of mind, we can accidentally steal from one another. Brahmacharya has to do with constant awareness of the center of consciousness. We forget that. Most of us forget that a lot during the day. So when you catch yourself and you say, wow, I just caught up in this crap at work or in a personal relationship, and I forgot Atman. I forgot what I know. I have forgotten my yoga. It slipped my mind for a few minutes. Don't beat up on yourself, but it's realizing, wow, I just lost it. And so it's like, no, mind, you need to keep remembering the absolute reality center of conscious Brahman, which is, Brahmacharya. And so it's not beating up on yourself. It's a reminder. It says, keep doing that. Aparigraha, the possessiveness. And so I catch myself being possessive about something. We're possessive about the remainder of the bowl of chocolate hummus that Matri made yesterday. And Rojo still hasn't been able to eat any of it. It's tempting to be possessive about that bowl of chocolate hummus and not leave any for Rojo. That's not nice. Let's not cling to it. And we live this, do the same thing with purity of the saucha, the purity of the body and mind. And we realize, wait a minute, I know that I should be eating better food. I know I should be exercising and taking care of my physical body. But I notice sometimes I'm falling for eating the junk food. And I'm going in the wrong direction. What's the key? Beat up on myself? No, remind yourself, see, go in the right direction. When Roseanne just mentioned that there's things going on in Brazil and the effect that is on her, what effect does it have on her, on her santosh, on her feeling of inner contentment? If she feels discontent, she sees a nude item and she feels discontent, she can remind herself, wait a minute, the inner world is still there, sadhana is there, satsang is still there, my internet connection still works, we can still hang out together, and it's really okay. There's things out here that are crazy. I'll do what I can within my community and country to contribute to the welfare of all of us in our country and world. But as far as my sadhana goes, I can cultivate contentment. Am I training my senses? Am I riding through the firestorm of training my senses called tapas? Svadhyaya, am I doing my introspection? This thing we're talking about today is a part, an important and useful part of Svadhyaya. It's not just reading the philosophy. It's not just reading the mantras, the words. It's living it. And so am I doing that? And maybe we realize, well, in the last week or so, I've been so caught up in work and I'm worried about that that I have been lazy with my introspection and looking at myself. And so, no mind, don't go there. Stay involved with this stuff. Don't become a fanatic. Don't become a fanatic, but live this yogic stuff right in the middle of life. And am I surrendering? Ishvara Pranadhana. Am I doing that surrendering? And often we realize, I'm clinging to stuff. I'm forgetting to do the pranadhana part. I'm forgetting to do the surrender, letting go. I don't need to beat up on myself. I need to remind myself, oops, you dropped the ball here, self, me. I need to keep practicing surrender. This is what we're talking about. This is so hang out with these two things. Come back on your own, either in book or come to the website and read through these things, please, and internalize this. And maybe it doesn't have to be as dramatic as the example I told you about the woman being murdered by her husband. It doesn't have to be that dramatic, but allow yourself to remember examples from your own life where you have fallen into these traps before. It happens all the time. We're not bad people. We're not failures. Obstacles are predictable. Go back and look at chapter 1, Sutras 30 and 31. What Patanjali outlines what I playfully call the 13 yucky things. These are obstacles that naturally occur. And that's what we're talking about here in these sutras. It's just that this is a more subtler aspect to it. Okay? So, want to go take a walk? We're going to go take a walk and come back in about 50 minutes and talk about the 4 functions of mind, which of course relates to all of this that we're talking about here. All of this that we're talking about here plays out within the antakarna, within the 4 functions of mind. It all plays out there. So, okay. All righty. So say goodbye, Ma.
Goodbye.
Want to take a walk?
Absolutely.
We're going to go take an absolutely walk. We're going to absolutely take a walk. And then we'll come back. There's Daniel. Hi, Daniel. One of my favorite soldiers. Very peaceful man.
See you next week, Nilesh.
Yes, see you soon, Nilesh. Okay, bye all. Dewey Dewey, in honor of the duchies, Dewey Dewey.
Please, Sarji, push the button, Roseanne.
Okay, did she say it? Okay, all right, thank you, Roseanne. I'm going to push the button. Thank you.
Bye, see you soon.
We will have a good walk. Thank you, Tara. Okay, here we go. I'm going to push it. 3, 2, 1.